Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Super Region 1 Playoff Podcast presented by D2Football.com, along with D2 KFerg, Chris Ferguson, and Cary Moyer. I am Chuck Bittner here for one last time in this playoff season to talk about the Super Region 1 bracket. This will be our last playoff special of the season. After this, we'll, of course, be into semifinals, so we'll take everything back to the national level. You can catch those shows on Sunday night. Plans pending for a pregame show or pregame special for the national championship. Stay tuned for info on that, but this will be our final playoff round special for Super Region 1. So happy to be here to recap SR1's round 2 and talk about the big matchup coming up this Saturday, which will have Frostburg State playing at Kutztown for the Super Region 1 championship and a trip to the national semifinals. So guys, before we dive into the games from last week, recap that a little bit and then look at the matchup coming up. Let's kind of take stock of the current state of the bracket from a national perspective. Of course, this is our Super Region 1 bracket, where we have Kutztown taking on Frostburg. Obviously, that's the focus of our conversation tonight. As we kind of skim ahead and look at Super Region 2, here's an interesting one, guys. We actually have two seeded teams playing in the regional final. If you can believe that, it's the only quad in the bracket where we have two seeded teams left. What you will see as we go through this, all four number 1 seeds are still in, but only one other seeded team, and that's Newberry, the number 3 seed, playing at Albany State. Love that matchup. I think that's possibly the most competitive and possibly the best matchup of the upcoming weekend. And then when we go to Super Region 3, Minnesota State doing their thing again, going on the road, winning those road playoff games. And, of course, their next task is to go to Ferris State and take on the defending national champ. So really excited to see how that will play out this weekend in Michigan. And then in the SR4 bracket, I think this is a sneaky good matchup. I do think UTPB can give Harding a good game. We've got the Bisons taking on University of Texas Permian Basin. Of course, Harding took out both of the MIAA co-champs to get into the regional final, and UTPB took out the RMAC to get to the regional final. So love that. So guys, before we kind of just move on from that, Chris, I know that obviously you pay attention to things from the national level. We're going to obviously devote our time to the SR1 bracket as we kind of went through 2, 3, and 4. What kind of really stands out to you? What are you really looking forward to this weekend from those matchups?
Well, I mean, I think when you think about SR3 and SR4, they're two really big heavyweights, but they also have matchups that could cause them some fits. And I think it's a matter of do they find weaknesses and exploit them enough that even if they win those games, even if Ferris and Hardy win those games, there's more tape that teams in the next couple rounds can exploit against them. And so I'm just really looking forward to sort of those matchups. If you think about Mankato and their run game, for example, and UTPB in their pass game against Harding, and also, you know, Ashland had a recipe that they tried to execute, try to keep Ferris off the field, but their offense off the field, but they were successful in that. But when the moments that Ferris got the opportunity, man, they made the most of it. So to what extent can Mankato and UTPB slow down their opponents is what I'm really interested in. And I agree. I mean, I think SR2 is definitely going to be a bit of a chess match.
I think that SR2 matchup, if you look at where we're at right now, if you could go back to the preseason and try to poll, you know, anybody who watches this and say, who do you think SR2 comes down to? I don't think very many people would have said Albany State and Newberry in Super Region 2. So I think that's a really exciting matchup and a third straight home playoff game for Albany State. That's a really big deal for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, our focus, of course, is the Super Region 1 bracket. So let's have a little bit of discussion on how we got to our final by reviewing round number 2. And Cary, we'll start with the game at Kutztown. You were there last weekend. And of course, we had talked about this being a rematch from way back in week 1. The game played out a little bit differently, but the results pretty much looked similar.
It was. And, when we talked about this last week, again, it was a great win week 1 for Kutztown. Again, all those weather delays But, there was a lot of football played, the rest of the season, through championships all the way, through getting to this point after, Kutztown played a fellow Northeast 10, opponent there, Bentley in the first round to get back with Assumption. So again, but pretty much the same result. And again, it's the things that we've seen out of Kutztown all year, just so solid in all three phases of the game. Again, last week, when we talked about, Judd Novak, again, he's so confident. Field general is the word I used. He's just great at quarterback, and he had a huge game rushing, in this one, 125 yards, I believe, 3, scores on the ground. And, again, just made great decisions passing the ball, a couple of TDs throwing, his touchdown, interception ratio now, 25 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, and, just did a great job. Having Jaden Stewart back, after being out for a couple of weeks, broke off a long run. He had over 100 yards rushing. And, again, Burkhart with a receiving touchdown out of the backfield. Again, they're just so dangerous in so many ways. And defense, I mean, it's always going to come down to that defense. Again, just lights out, so tough. Talked about it the last couple of weeks. Freddie Redder, who was the defensive athlete of the year in the PSAC last year, Brendan Heil, the linebacker this year for Kutztown. But, in the last 2 games, Redder's had 2 sacks, in each of the last 2 games, forced a fumble, recovered a fumble this last game. And special teams, I mean, they're just so solid. A real long, kickoff return, that sets some things up too. So it's just, they're solid in all phases of the game. And, just pretty much, again, the dominate's a word for it. Just a really nice overall job by Kutztown in all 3 phases of the game.
Yeah, and Cary, I think similar to last week, this is another game where Kutztown gets a lopsided win, and they were really able to minimize the snap count for a lot of their key players. So offensive, they only ran 46 plays, I think 46, 47 plays.
40 something, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously you can still have 449 yards of offense, 56 points on the board, but they only ran 46 plays. Judd Novak only throws the ball 13 times, runs 7. Stewart and Burkhart each only had a handful of carries. So, especially with that first round bye going away for our top seeded team, these teams are now playing, 15 games in a row. That's a long haul. So the fact that they've been able to win a couple of home playoff games and not really have to ask a whole lot of some of their really key players, I really have to think that's an advantage going into this next round.
Definitely. It's, who's healthy when, and, relatively speaking, KU is pretty healthy, and, they have depth. So definitely poised to be in a good spot here heading into the championship game.
Yeah, and on the Assumption side of this, good season for them getting into the playoffs and, of course, winning that road playoff game. And, KFerg, we talked about this on Sunday night. Man, really tough assignment for the Greyhounds to go to Kutztown and have to play this with a third-string quarterback who hadn't really seen a whole lot of snaps this year. Just not really a good way to go into a playoff game against a team like Kutztown.
No, but I think he performed relatively well. And watching the game, Assumption early had a little bit of success running the ball, but then it just felt like they realized from a combination of what the defense was giving them and the hole that they had, like they were just behind so much that they're going to have to pass the ball more. And, and he was running for his life half the time. So sometimes you could turn that into a bit of a positive. And he had some opportunities where he did run and was able to gain some yards. And I think that helped a little bit. In addition, like the quick passing game, it was like he wanted to drop back and launch the ball down the field. And when they did that, they had some success with that too. But that Kutztown defensive line, man, like they just had him running so much, and so they had to resort to maybe a little bit more of a quick game. And I think Kutztown was willing to give that up. and because they knew that if you get to the inside the 20, inside the red zone, it's going to be really tough to run the ball. So I thought that, Josiah Patrick did, relatively well under the circumstances, but, Kutztown is just on a bit of a different level, and it really just showed.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree. He performed admirably. It was just a really difficult spot to be in against, a top 10 team in the country. So the Golden Bears get the win and move on to the regional final. Of course, that is going to be a home game for them, and they will play Frostburg State. So the Bobcats went back to California for the second time this year. Again, a very competitive game, a very tight game that came down to the very end. And this time the Bobcats get the win by a couple of points. Really interesting one here, guys. Again, special teams was a big factor. Being able to minimize your own mistakes and take advantage of the other team's mistakes was huge in this game, as it was the first time they played as well. And I think the fact that both teams had a different starting quarterback was a very interesting element to this game as well. And for Frostburg, to have Jordan Brooks back, they've had to start 3 different quarterbacks during the course of this year, but it's become pretty clear that Jordan Brooks is the right leader for that offense. He's just been a very steady hand for them, and he had a very productive game on Saturday. But again, it was that running game. They didn't quite have the same number of yards that they had at JCSU, but when it really counted, KJ Smothers, Owen Doyle, that is a very tough running combination, guys. Cary, when you were watching this game and had a chance to break it down, what are some of the things that stood out to you, for obviously looking at it from a PSAC perspective, or some of the things that you thought Cal needed to have done differently to possibly have won this game?
Well, I think, you kind of hit on it too. Having, Brooks at quarterback was a huge piece of this. I think, statistically, probably one of his better games. But I think that ability to throw the ball and have the bounced attack, obviously had a better outcome for them than they were when they were at Cal before. But again, I think you hit on some of those points. They're just, all 3 phases of the game. And again, I looked back, at their record all the way through. And again, talked about before playing, some PSAC teams, throughout the season, of course, playing Cal before. But I think the recipe for success was the bounce that they had. No, they didn't have the amount of yards rushing that they did, the week before. But again, I think that bounced attack was a difference maker, in beating Cal this time.
Yeah, and Chris, we kind of talked about this a little bit on Sunday night too. Cary could mention the balance and just the number of different playmakers that they incorporate on that Frostburg offense. They have like 4 or 5 different receivers that have very comparable stats for the season. They're all impact players. And then 2 really good running backs that they mix in as well. It's just a lot that you have to try to account for as a defense.
And I think you see that in 20 or 25. Just the fact that you have Paul Umstead and Ray Adams, and there's other guys that you can call out for Frostburg that they're so balanced that they're all those wide receivers are right there on the stat sheet. They're not anybody really separate from each other, and I think that's just because of the fact that you got to account for all of them, and that's asking for a lot out of any defense.
Yeah, and even though they only had 133 rush yards in the game, I thought their offensive line really stood out as well. And we saw that the week before at JCSU, but it's, Cary, I know that you're an offensive line guy. We talk about it all the time. Everything starts up front. I was really impressed with Frostburg State's offensive line in this game and the game before. They have 2 all-region players on that offensive line. One's a first teamer and one's a second teamer. So, they've really got talent all over the field, and it's not just at the skill positions. And that's going to really give them a chance against a tough Kutztown team when we get to that matchup here in just a couple minutes. But yeah, I thought their offensive line really did stand out in this game as well.
No, definitely. Again, I always say that it all starts up front, and don't want to tip too much away to our preview coming up, but I think it's going to start all up front again this week as well.
All right. Well, before we move on from this, let's get a few thoughts from Frostburg State coach Eric Wagner. We had a little bit of video that we got from his post-game comments afterwards, and let's see what he had to say about the Bobcats' win at California in the second round.
we knew it was going to be a battle. Our first half looked like the game we came here and played last time. We had 2 turnovers right off the bat. We gave them a 4th down conversion by being offside, and basically gave them 14 points. When we were here last time, we gave them 14 points on special teams and a pick 6, and then we gave them 12 men on the field, gave them a first down, and they converted like they did today, gave them 21 points. So we talked about it. If we stop doing that in the second half, it's going to be hard for them to get down there and score. And we had that ability in the second half. The guys, we've battled some games. We've been in triple overtime, double overtime. We've been on the road in the playoffs down at JCSU last week. We've been here before. So the guys just, we talk about playing one play at a time like it's its own individual game. Let the last play go behind you, whether it was good, bad, and different. I thought they did a great job of that in the second half.
Yeah, I think that was a big factor in that game. Just like when they were there before, they had some really costly mistakes, and they did in this one as well. But this time they were able to overcome some of those mistakes. And he actually went on to talk about how Cal historically has been a team that's really good at making a team pay for their mistakes. And they paid dearly for mistakes they made the first time they played. So they were able to kind of minimize that and play a lot better in the second half and got a really good win out of it. And it was very uncharacteristic that Cal missed a couple of field goals in this game as well, including at the very start when they got the turnover on the kickoff. They were set up with really good field position. Unfortunately, they missed a field goal. And then at the very end, they had a drive going to potentially get a game-winning field goal late in the game. Unfortunately, that drive kind of stalled out, and they couldn't get a few extra yards for their kicker. Ended up having to make that attempt from 45 yards out. And I don't know if he just didn't quite get all on it, but they came up a couple of yards short. And it's one of those plays or one of those things where one more play for a couple of yards, and maybe Cal makes that field goal. So, but as it is, Frostburg State gets out of there with a round 2 win. Really good, hard-earned victory on the road for the Bobcats. So they will go on to play Kutztown in our regional final. So that is the matchup. Andre Reed Stadium this coming Saturday. Cary and I will both be there for this one. Looking forward to it. Should be a really good game. I do really like this matchup. For one thing, I'm glad it's a little bit different, something that we haven't seen before with Frostburg making a run through the playoffs. We haven't seen Kutztown and Frostburg. It's good to see the Mountain East in the regional final again, making their way through the bracket. So I do really like this matchup. And guys, as we start to unpack it a little bit, let's kind of step backwards a little bit and kind of review how each of these teams got to this point in the playoffs. And of course, we'll kind of reprofile these teams a little bit so we can get ready for the matchup. So Cary, when we look at Kutztown's season to date, it's a pretty simple summary, man. It's just wins all across the board, going all the way back to the very beginning. Really, we're not challenged at all until we got late into the season. And now we get back into the playoffs, and it's almost like we're back into mid-season form or early season form where they've really just kind of pulled away and separated from the competition. But, the fact now that they've also been at home a lot since the start of November, this really feels like a good recipe for success here, the way this is shaping up for the Golden Bears.
No, definitely. And again, with it flip-flopping each year, of course, the PSAC championship game, was here in the East, and so championship game right into Super Region 1 playoffs, and had a lot of success. But again, when you look at it, and having Jed Novak at quarterback, since he took over as the starter, 36-3 record. So again, I know we talk about some of the things, maybe not all the glitzy stats. Again, I think just watching him live the last couple of weeks, I said it after Bentley and after Assumption again, just a super smart, hardcore football player. And I just think, really the sky's the limit, for him, with where he's at. And, again, they had those 2 tough games, a little bit tougher than the rest of the season, with Bloom that was feisty, I think is the word we've been using. Of course, the PSAC championship game, a little bit of adversity, a couple of turnovers there with Bentley, but it's kind of like they're playing at home, again, and we talked about it. You said it again tonight, Chuck, that thing of to me, honestly, not having that bye week, I think has been great. You stay in regular, game week mode and prepping, and they're healthy. So again, I know we'll talk about a little bit more with both the teams, but I think both the teams that, should be here are here. I think everybody expects the number one seeds to be there, but, Frostburg, I know we'll talk about them a little bit more, but they've earned their way to be here. And I think this is going to be a great game.
Yeah, so let's kind of dig into Kutztown just a little bit more. It's a lot of names that we have mentioned before, especially on that defensive side of the ball. And, Cary, I know Freddie Redder is kind of the guy that really has a lot of name recognition from, going back to last year being a first teamer on our Elite 100 and most of the All-America teams. He was the Defensive Player of the Year. He's a heavyweight wrestler, so he's the kind of guy that has a lot of name recognition. But on that defensive side of the ball, I mean, you could almost take your pick of any names that we could call out as a standout. When the PSAC East All Conference team came out, I think they could have probably just made it simple and just said the Kutztown defense, because all of those guys are impact players.
No, definitely. And, on defense, and again, we talked about it a little bit when we started the playoff podcast here. 3 of their defensive linemen were first team, kind of, talking a little bit, what you talked about with, the O-line of Frostburg. 3 of the Kutztown Golden Bear defensive linemen were first team PSAC East. And one of the guys that wasn't ended up being the MVP of the championship game. 3 linebackers, Brandon Heil, the PSAC East our defensive athlete of the year this year. And then, Strausser and Johnson at linebacker as well. Strausser had an INT last week. That was another thing. This defense came up big. 2 interceptions. Redder had the forced fumble again. For those who are just, kind of catching us for a first time, had some injury stuff earlier in the season, but he's clicking now. I mean, the KU Bears defense has had 10 sacks in the last 2 games. And Freddie Redder had 2 of them against Bentley and had 2 of them against Assumption, forced fumble recovery against Assumption. So the defense is tough. 2 INTs, 2 interceptions last week against Assumption as well. So, again, it's you got to have a bounce attack and try and find something that's going to work. You can't live just on the run or just can't live on the pass against this defense.
Well, and Cary, you've mentioned depth a couple times, and obviously Kutztown has a whole bunch of that. I really like that they were able to get Jaden Stewart back on the field last week. If they're going to keep going in this tournament and potentially get past this round and maybe even past the next round, that depth is really important. And having Jaden Stewart back, I think, is a huge bonus for that offense.
Definitely. And, he's a big time playmaker. And again, Burkhart, very complete back, said many times he can be a bruiser, he's, can come out of the backfield, catch passes, and he's shown bursts of speed. They also have, Maxwell, who's a tight end, great tight end. They bring him back, and kind of old school fullback with him, but having Jaden Stewart healthy and not having to rely on, really giving the rock to Burkhart for a majority of the time, is huge. Having, both of those guys healthy. And, again, some of the other running backs had a lot of success against Bentley. But talking about the offense again, Judd Novak, just lights out. Chernecki and Everett, 2 of the guys I've talked about. For those folks maybe just joining in, 2 of our Elite 100 watch list guys coming in. That's your left guard and your left tackle. And in the PSAC East, all 5 of the offensive linemen for Kutztown were either first or second team. And and again, the receivers, spread around. Crisilla is, probably one of the go-to guys. But again, it's just how the defense is so balanced, offense is so balanced as well.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the style of the passing attack for Kutztown. So for fans that might be tuning in from Frostburg State that maybe haven't really seen Kutztown play, we've talked a lot about the defense. I think that's probably pretty well known at this point. We've talked about how they have a pretty solid run game with 2 really good running backs, and we've talked about Novak. But what's the style of the passing attack? How do they come at you with the passing game?
So again, The OC and the DC at Kutztown, awesome. And Coach Quarterman, the offense, they're going to find your weakness and they're going to beat you with it. And again, Judd Novak just makes good decisions, and they can do stuff with the short game. And having Burkhart come out of the backfield. But, I said it after the Bentley game, just being there and watching it live, I just thought, he looked like a total quarterback, and he can sling it downfield. So, whether it's, finding soft spots and hitting those, or the vertical game, again, it's, you can't defend everything, and whatever you're going to give them, they're going to take advantage of.
All right. So that's a profile on Kutztown. Of course, we've talked about all of these players throughout the playoff season. Let's now change our approach. We'll look at Frostburg State. Again, like Kutztown, it's just a team that doesn't have very many weaknesses. And their roster, much like Kutztown, you could go down the list and pretty much put almost any player from any position onto the all-MEC team. A lot of these guys that we have spotlighted here, most of these players are all MEC, first team all-MEC. Couple are all region players. With them, again, Cary, it's a team where it starts up front. I actually didn't list their offensive linemen here because it was kind of tough to pull out which names do we want to kind of spotlight here for them, because, again, they have so many contributors on the offensive side of the ball. But just because we didn't list their offensive line, that's not a great spot for them. They have tons and tons of talent at the offensive line as well. And we talked about how they have a couple of all-region performers. That running attack, KFerg, I know you got to see it. We've talked about it a little bit, but that running attack, it definitely feels to me that if they're going to be successful at Kutztown, those two running backs will have to be central to it.
Well, yeah, and the offensive line, because I mean that's the issue here, is that if you want to have some success against Kutztown, you're going to have to definitely win in the trenches, and that's not a low bar. And when you think about like Nick Blankenship and Doug Prume, those guys, I mean they're just really going to have to step up to find those holes. And I'm really curious to see what happens when Frostburg gets into like third and short. Because that's when you're really going to see, the immovable object and the opposing force, something like that. So that's what I'm really curious about, because I think that there's going to be several opportunities to see some third and shorts for Frostburg, and how do they respond to get those running backs free is a question I have.
Yeah, and then on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, Frostburg, like Kutztown, they're very good up front. They're defensive linemen. They had a couple of all-MEC guys. Christian Taylor was put on the all-region team as well. Renier Hauveland. I've watched Frostburg a couple times this year. He really stood out to me. And the two linebackers there, Carter Mazalewski, and he had a big game against Cal last week. Jalen Boyd, another all-region player. Both those guys at the linebacker position, very, very productive. I do think that is a defense that can cause some problems for Kutztown. We've seen a few defenses have success slowing down the Golden Bears, IUP, of course, being the most successful at that. And I do think there are some similarities between that Frostburg defense and the players that you see there with the IUP defense and the way that they were able to match up with Kutztown. So the other thing that I kind of like about them, we've talked about the number of receivers that they have that make plays for that Frostburg offense. And Cary, we kind of talked way back in the beginning of the playoff pods about the teams that did have a little bit more success against Kutztown, being Bloomsburg and IUP at the end of the season. Both of those teams have really good playmakers at the receiver position that they were able to get to the ball to in open space. So Bloom has a couple of really good possession receivers, but also the guys that they could really get the ball to in open space. And IUP with Devin Whitlock and Maurice Massey, same thing. You've got a deep threat over the top, but you've also got a really underneath playmaker. I think Frostburg State has the players to execute that type of game plan as well when we look at the productivity that they have.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, I think, a lot of this is going to be a chess match and trying to find weaknesses and exploit those and try and have some success with it. talked about a little bit after the PSAC championship game and, some of the underneath stuff. And again, I think with, having Brooks back at quarterback, but, we mentioned a few times, those three receivers, had over 200 yards combined last week for Frostburg. So, that's definitely going to be a factor. But again, I think there will be a lot of chess match. I think this will be the closest game out of the Super Region 1 games that Kutztown's played so far.
So when we look at Frostburg State's journey to the playoffs, it's quite a bit different than Kutztown's. You started off, just as well. They were really hot for that first month plus. You got to 5-0, then they had the really tough overtime loss at home to Glenville State, but they responded to that. And that was something that we really needed to see this Frostburg State team do, because last year when they kind of took their first loss of the season, that was the start of just a terrible downhill slide, and they didn't win again for the rest of the year. So we really needed to see them respond after that really tough overtime loss, and they did exactly that. They beat Charleston in OT. They beat a good Wheeling team who was still in contention, had the tough game at California. That's the only other loss on the season, but when I look at this schedule, the thing that really jumps out to me is since that October 11th game against Glenville, going back, almost 2 months at this point, they have only played at home one time. So we've talked about road warriors in the playoffs and teams that have had to get on planes and things like that. But man, you play at home and then it's 3 straight road games, 1 home game, and now this is going to be their 4th straight road game, 3 of them playoff games. So really, really tough assignment. And the fact that they've won all of those games except the close one at Cal is really, really impressive. But they've been racking up the miles on the bus. And, you hope that that's something that doesn't, catch up with them, that they become a bit road weary. But it's definitely something that they have to deal with and they have to overcome. But one of the things that we know coaches really embrace is routine. And they now have a routine for going on the road every week to play these games. So I want to play you guys a little bit of audio from Frostburg State's pregame show that they did with Coach Wagner. We heard from him a little bit earlier. I want to play a little bit of their interview with him where he kind of talks about what their process has been in preparing for the playoff games since the start of the playoff season.
You have to go on the road. You're playing the number 2 seed in the region. Then you have to go on the road again to a team that you just lost to about 3 weeks ago. Do you bring some of that mentality, and how do you prepare the players to go into those tough road contests where, now it's where the games really, really start to matter?
I mean, yeah, that experience has been great. Some of our coaches on our staff have also had some playoff experience too, bowl game experience. The biggest part of it for us was the players didn't have the experience. That's fine. Let's make it feel like it's just another regular season game. So we handle everything behind the scenes, make sure everything's good. And they just go out and practice, and all they're doing is worrying about an opponent. Too much when people get into playoffs, they make it bigger than what it is. And it is a big deal. It's win or go home. But you got to treat it like everything they already know. I'd been very fortunate, been in a number of playoff games, and where I was at before, called our head coach, Kevin Donnelly, who I'd worked under and been a ton of playoffs. And I had a pretty good idea of what he was going to tell me, but just kind of wanted some confirmation. And the biggest thing is don't break your routine. Keep doing what you're doing. You get into the playoffs, don't sit here and say, okay, well, now we're just going to go all helmet practices so we're healthy, or we're going to go all full padded practices so we're ready to go, or we're going to try and install this new offense or defense, because you only have a week. At the end of the day, you only have a week, and they only have a week to prepare. So if you come in and you're trying to Johnson C. Smith, we didn't know anything about him. But if we try to go and take all 11 games and break them down and find, hey, this works against this one play and that works against this one play and that works there, you're putting in a whole new offense, a whole new defense. So, you just have to understand who you are at the end of the day, what you're going to do, and get a good scouting report on them.
Yeah, so interesting comments there about the preparation process, and it did just kind of ring with me because I had been looking at this and thinking, man, that's just a lot of road games. But Cary, coaches really do like routine, and teams like routine. And now just going on the road every week, it really has become routine for them. So, maybe this is just another thing and it doesn't affect them at all.
No, I love it. I love what Coach said. And again, it's like you just have your players focusing on playing ball, and there's all that other stuff, where we eat in, where we stay in, what time, with buses catching this and that. Keep all that stuff out of their hair. Just let them focus on what they do and play ball. And how we practice all season long, that's how we're going to practice now. You're just going out and playing a football game. So no, I love it. And so it just adds more mystique to the whole thing here. We have the road team that's been on the road, seems forever against a home team that's been at home what seems forever. So it just builds it that much more for this game.
All right. Well, let's get into our final analysis on the matchup and make our picks. And one final thing for consideration before we do that, game time forecast in Kutztown for this Saturday. Forecast calling for 38 degrees, mostly cloudy, winds light and variable. I got to be honest with you, Cary, here in the Commonwealth, that's pretty much just every day, all winter long. That's like, if you didn't know what the weather was, you could just say, mid-30s, mostly cloudy, winds light and variable.
Yeah.
So honestly, for this time of the year, that's pretty good football weather. I'll take a little bit warmer if we can get it, but that doesn't sound too bad. Should be pretty good. Either way, don't expect weather to be a factor in this game for either team, one way or the other. So I think it's a pretty good looking forecast. So as we enter into final analysis and make our picks, there's a look at your matchup. Frostburg State going to Kutztown. That Kutztown defense, of course, it's not just over 10 points per game with Kutztown or with Assumption putting up 19 last week, but still one of the best in the country in scoring defense. And, that delta between scoring offense and scoring defense is among the highest in the nation as well. So, KFerg, I'm going to go to you first for any final thoughts on this game and make your pick for who advances out of the Super Region 1 bracket.
Well, I was kind of looking at some numbers and I found something that I thought was pretty interesting. When you think about Kutztown and their last, I would say, since Bloomsburg, so it's Bloomsburg, IUP, Bentley, and Assumption, there hasn't been that much of a team that's been able to really truly run against Kutztown until you got to Assumption. And on top of that, there were situations where even like, the quarterback was the leading rusher. And you just like, man, like that's asking a lot out of a quarterback to run and throw the ball against a team like this, and you're exposing them potentially to a lot of hard hits. If you're going to win against Kutztown, you've got to find a way to run the ball. And Frostburg State is one of those clubs that I think could have some success on the ground against them. On the flip side, though, Kutztown's defense, they had, I think it's like 4 sacks, or 4 or 5 sacks against IUP, and another 4 or 5 sacks against Bentley. And Assumption wasn't any better. And those are all teams that were forced to throw the ball. So if you're Frostburg, you can't afford to get behind in this game pretty early and forced to play the way Kutztown wants you to play, which is essentially you become one-dimensional and they can pin their ears back. I think Frostburg is going to make this game very competitive. I think they have the tools to do it. But my pick, I already made it on Sunday night. I'm not really straying from it at this point. I think Kutztown's just got quite a bit to work with. And I just see them at home as much as, we talked about Frostburg being a road warrior. And I think that being on the road is not necessarily a bad thing. It's less distractions. I think Kutztown's going to get it done.
Yeah, I picked Kutztown, and I'll stay with that as well. Cary, I'll give you the final word here on the picks. I picked Kutztown as well. I'm going to stay with that. I do like the Golden Bears for the win in this game. But if Frostburg is going to win it, how would it happen? How do I think it would happen? I agree with everything that Chris said. They're going to have to be able to run the football. That's essential. They've got to be able to run the football. I think there's a lot of pressure on Frostburg State's defense to perform early in this game. Kutztown is very good at putting teams behind early, making them play from behind, and then pressuring them relentlessly to play catch up. You really cannot afford to let that happen against them. So there's a lot of pressure on Frostburg State's defense to do that, but I think that they can. IUP's defense was able to do it. After the first couple drives, but that game, IUP and Kutztown both opening drive right down the field and scored. Once they got past those scripted drives that they opened the game with, things really settled into a very defensive battle for the middle stages of that game. I think we could see that with this game as well, because both teams have the defense to do that. I really like that Frostburg has a quarterback that doesn't get rattled, very poised, makes plays, has a lot of talent around him. I think all of those things can give Frostburg State a really good fighting chance to be in this game in the fourth quarter and possibly even pull out a win. So if they're going to do it, that's sort of how I think it has to happen. And obviously have to minimize mistakes, minimize penalties, and all of that. All those things considered, it still just is a huge ask against a team that's just showed so few vulnerabilities all year. So I am going to go with Kutztown. Cary, your thoughts in the final analysis in this matchup and your pick for the win.
Yeah, it does all start up front. Totally agree. Getting behind against Kutztown, you just put yourself in a really bad situation. I think it's going to be a good game. Frostburg's going to have to play mistake-free football. Kutztown will punish teams that do make mistakes, and Kutztown is so solid in all three phases of the game. I mean, a huge kickoff return, last week, but, what they've done in blocking punts, they've been, blocking, field goals, the turnover margin, just last week, again, 2 INTs, a fumble, on defense, they're just so solid. And offense, again, they spread around to a lot of guys, and they're going to find what works. So, it's all going to start up front. For Frostburg, I think it's going to have to be, it sounds cliche, but mistake-free football, because you can't do it. And Kutztown is deep. They rotate guys in and out. That defense is fresh. So many different playmakers that they go to on offense. So, they're good, they're deep, and they're great in all three phases of the game. So I think it will be a more competitive game maybe than the last two for Kutztown. But Kutztown is the number 1 seed for a reason. They've been our number 3 team in our top 25, for a reason. Again, you look at our 3 number 1 seeds here in the playoffs have been, of course, our 1, 2, and 3s with Ferris State, Harding, and Kutztown pretty much all the way through. So I fully expect and am absolutely picking Kutztown to win this game.
Well, and if Frostburg does find a way, you will undoubtedly see us in a lot of Twitter mentions early Saturday afternoon if the Bobcats find a way to get this done. So
won't be the first time. Won't be the first time.
It won't.
Okay, since we went there, props to KFerg on having Frostburg getting to this game. And so again, I know I don't get on the national stage with it, but if Frostburg would win this game, then I'm going to pick them to go all the way through. So,
well, regardless, we do really like the matchup, and I think we all expect a really competitive game here on Saturday afternoon. So that will kind of bring a wrap to the Super Region 1 bracket. Before we close out the show, let's spend a few minutes, guys, revisiting the conversation that we started last week about the Harlon Hill Award, because since we got together last week, we have actually seen the release of the finalists for the Harlon Hill Trophy. So quickly recapping how that works. Of course, last week we talked about the nominees. There were 36 total. Those novenies are grouped by region. So we talked about the nominees that came out of Super Region 1. Judd Novak, Jamison Alston, Matthew Reevy, Curtis Allen, JJ Jordan, running back from Slippery Rock, Leonard Farrow, running back from Fairmont State, Jackson Ostrowski, and then Jake Hastentine, quarterbacks from Lock Haven and Assumption, respectively. Those were the nominees from Super Region 1. Of course, there's a whole list of nominees from the other regions as well. Each region then has 2 finalists that advance after the regional voting occurs. So the SIDs that were voting were only voting within their region in this first round of voting. And then the next round will be a national ballot. So from this group, the finalists that advanced were Curtis Allen, the running back from Virginia Union, and Judd Novak, the quarterback from Kutztown. I do believe that's the pair that I picked to advance from this group. So that's the pair from Super Region 1. And in Super Region 2, Reed Sharpia and Marcus Stokes, those two actually faced each other last week in West Florida. Newberry got that win. Reed Sharpia, a name that honestly I was not acquainted with until about the middle of the season, but he had a huge year for Newberry. Marcus Stokes, player kind of coming into the year we thought would probably be in this position at West Florida. And in Super Region 3, a pair of guys who not only had big seasons, but all around remarkable careers for both of these athletes. Jack Strand at Minnesota Moorhead, Gavin Sukup at Indianapolis, all kinds of all-season honors, career honors for both of those players. So they are the SR3 finalists. And then Andrew Miller, running back from Harding, and Drew Nash, quarterback from Western Colorado, the finalists out of Super Region 4. So on the spot, I know we probably already kind of projected our picks when we talked last week, but on the spot, KFerg, I'll go to you first. Top 3 for you.
Ooh. First of all, I just want to say I feel like the SIDs must have watched our show because, we did talk about a lot about Judd Novak and, don't quite have the numbers, doesn't jump off the page, but does so much for his team. And I was like, man, somebody must be watching us. So thank you. With that being said, top 3. Oof. Well, to me, number 1 is Curtis Allen. Number 2, I would say would be Jack Strand. And, number 3. I want to go with Drew Nash. Or Gavin. I guess I'll go with Gavin Sukup. I think what he's done as well, pretty remarkable at UND. So I think those would be my 3.
Well, I'd make it pretty easy. I have the same top 3 for Curtis Allen. He's above everybody else. He's the runaway leader. He's, look, when quarterbacks like Zach Zabrowski have the kind of numbers that he had, we kind of just say, hey, look, a quarterback puts up those numbers, he's got to have it. Well, Curtis Allen had that type of season from a running back position. So for me, he is the runaway winner of this. Absolutely should be the winner. I'll kind of be disappointed if he's not. So he's number 1. And then I have Jack Strand, number 2. Great quarterback, great career. And on top of that, this is a season honor, not career. He had a great season as well. And same for Gavin Sukup. So I go with the same 3. Curtis Allen as my winner, Jack Strand, runner-up, and then Gavin Sukup, number 3. Cary, how about you?
Curtis Allen. And again, we talked about it a lot last week. And again, from my perspective, here, PSAC, of course, Tyson Bagent, was the guy. So kind of, a measuring stick, and he had all the tangibles, he had all the numbers, as a quarterback. But yeah, Curtis Allen, and kind of a toss up, with Strand and Sukup. But I'll go so I'm going to mix it up a little bit. And again, I am doing this and just putting a little more emphasis on what KFerg said of, again, Chuck, I got to go back to, we talked about Novak, way back when we did our preseason previews for the West and the East with the PSAC. And last week, KFerg and I both were talking about JJ Jordan from Slippery Rock because of running back. But you know what? I think somebody's listening to us. So I'll go with Allen, Strand, and I'm going to give Novak as my number 3 because, again, just if the attention's been there and watching his body of work against Bentley and Assumption and what he's potentially going to do this Saturday, I'm going to go with the KU Golden Bear and put Novak in.
All right. I think it's a fair pick. And we'll close with, we'll talk more about Harlon Hill nominees on Sunday nights inside D2 football. We'll probably put everybody on the spot to make their top three. So KFerg and I kind of already let it out, but we'll talk about that more on Sunday night and kind of make more pitches for who those top candidates are. Let's close with this, not a very fancy graphic, but those are your current SR1 programs that have either head coach openings or coaching changes. Of course, it started kind of early with Millersville. It kind of made an early decision that they were going to make a change, so that job is open. Shippensburg, Coach Mack announced his retirement, so that job is open. That's a good position in the PSAC. Glenville State opened. That was the one that really surprised me. I did not see that coming. Not sure I totally understand it, but Mike Keller, who was the head coach there at Glenville, he has actually ended on his feet at West Virginia Wesleyan. Of all programs to move that quickly and land a really good head coach, West Virginia Wesleyan makes a quick change, and they've already got a new head coach on board. So hopefully that's the start of a good rebuilding process for them. Chris, a couple of really good jobs in the CIAA that were opened. It sounds like maybe one of those might be confirmed pretty soon.
Yeah, there's reports out there that Winston-Salem State, that Tory Woodbury, Hall of Fame quarterback in the CIAA, and for Winston-Salem State, is returning home to be the head coach. We'll know for sure tomorrow. But yeah, lots of sources out there, including HBCU Game Day, that's reporting that. So there's definitely a lot of excitement around that pick.
And Bowie State making a change. Yeah, tough deal there for Kyle Jackson, but that's a good job. I mean, you can win there.
Yep, absolutely. You can. There's a lot of things you can do there. One of the successes that Bowie has had is, some of those MEC programs recruit a lot in Maryland, and they decided maybe it's not working out there, and they'll go to somewhere like a Bowie State and flourish quite well. So, and there's a lot of Bowie State former players. It seems like that's what they like to elevate to the head coach level. There's a lot of former Bulldog players that are now coaches doing really well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they move next.
And then bottom right is West Liberty. Longtime coach Roger Wiley retired at the end of the season. So that is a position opened in the Mountain East. And Cary, explain the last logo that's on there that we hadn't pointed out yet there in the middle. Explain who that is.
That would be the Lackawanna College Falcons. So, for those who have been following my column at the bottom of it all season, I was given a little update. So again, we have a bunch of teams in the PSAC that have been there. Again, a little plug. This is the 75th anniversary of the PSAC. And we've had some teams come and go. And most recently in the West, there's been a hole in the schedule with the departure of Mercyhurst. So coming in now next season, it's already on the composite schedule for 2026. Lock Haven, who is currently in the PSAC East, will be moving to the PSAC West, and Lackawanna College. So for folks that are around football world, here in the Northeast, or certainly know who they are, have been playing, the JUCO schedule, and, have a lot of guys that end up, on a lot of D1, FBS, FCS schools, D2 schools. So still some hoops to jump through as far as everything to be, Division II ready. So more on that to come. But Lackawanna College, it will be in league play on the 2026 schedule. So again, maybe I'll do a little wrap up at the end of the season and talk a little bit more about that. But again, their longtime head coach decided he was going to retire here at the end of the year. So they will have a new coach coming in as they head into PSAC East play.
Yeah, that was a shame. And he retired for some health reasons, which was a real shame. I was very much looking forward to having him as a D2 head coach, because from day one, he would have been one of the winningest coaches in Division II. He has well over 200 career victories at Lackawanna. So we wish him well in retirement. So that's a position that's open. And just to be clear, Lackawanna, as of today, is not a Division II institution. And they will not be a Division II institution at the start of next season. My understanding is that the earliest they could be officially confirmed as a Division II institution is September. And that's not a given. It could actually roll into the following year. So my understanding is that they are going to be on the schedule. You're right, Cary. They're on the schedule. They're going to be in the conference next year. The games will most likely not count as Division II games, but they will be on the schedule. So we're going to include them. They'll be part of the PSAC coverage going forward. So that's a quick update on the current state of coaching changes in Super Region 1. And guys, that'll be a wrap on the Super Region 1 playoff podcast for the season. So really want to thank both of you for doing this with us. It's a lot of fun. Viewership was higher than it's ever been for these, so really appreciate everyone who watched. And KFerg, you and I will take it to the end on Inside D2 Football on Sunday nights. Cary, really appreciate you being here with us over the last couple of weeks. And I know that the PSAC audience will hope that we will continue to talk about the PSAC with Kutztown going forward. But with that, we'll call it a show. Thanks to both of you. Thanks to everyone who's watching. Enjoy the games this Saturday, and then we'll see you Sunday night for Inside D2 Football. See you, everyone.